Hey guys, I have to tell you what's going on in Iceland, and it's so much. I don't know what to start with, guys, but I can tell you the airport is under threat. Not only the main road between Reykjavik and Keflavik. There's news about that, but then there's news, and listen to this. Remember the worker that fell into the crack in January? The crack that opened after all these earthquakes in Grindavik in front of a driveway of a home. And that worker was supposed to fill the crack, and he was working there, and one of his co-workers, it was only two people working there, filling the crack with gravel and then compacting it. And one worker went away to get something, and when he came back, his colleague was gone. He vanished. And they started a search operation. They went in there with two people day and night for about, I think, 2 days. And they discovered that the crack must have opened even more, so that where they had it compacted, that was only landing on some kind of bank or something, and then it opened up deeper and there was a lake, and they were searching and searching and searching, but they couldn't find him. And then shortly, a few hours after they ended the search operation, the next eruption began. So luckily for the people that were trying to find him, that they got out of that crack. But the family now wants them to do something, which is understandable, but kind of crazy. We will talk about this. The family wants to find him, and they insist kind of on the search and rescue teams to go and find him. And the investigations about this incident finished, and the results just came out today, and it's kind of mind-blowing. It's really mind-blowing, guys. So also, could we see the whole Reykjanes peninsula being one volcanic eruption for decades? Let's dive into this, guys. There's even more than I just announced. So an Icelandic volcanologist thinks that it is possible that there could be a volcanic eruption that would last for decades. I mean, continuously, not like we've seen it since last November 10th, like eruption ends, magma chamber fills up again, eruption ends. Nope, continuously, guys. So earthquake activity all over Iceland continues in the higher ranges, which is kind of weird because it is in other volcanic areas, which is a little bit concerning. We'll talk about that. And one thing that is a little bit weird then, that actually in the area where we do have all these volcanic eruptions, there is only a minor seismic activity going on, because we know the magma chamber has to fill up again first before it sends magma on its way. So there was an earthquake today where we have a large volcano on the southern edge of the Vatnajökull glacier. So who came up with this idea that we could see like a decade-long eruption on the Reykjanes Peninsula? That would be a problem, because we've seen that the lava flows from the past eruptions have already threatened infrastructure. The last one was okay, but the one before did breach the defense walls in Svartsengi, and now they're saying the next one could even be bigger than the last one, and then it could threaten infrastructure in the north, the area of Vogar. And you know, look at that picture. This is what has just been reported. They're saying we must be prepared for a bigger eruption. That was just in the news. And you see the town of Vogar here, and you see where the lava carpet of the last eruption is. And that line here, if you've seen my last video, that is Reykjanesbro. That's the major highway that connects the capital, Reykjavik, with the airport. Very, very important airport. All the tourists are coming in there. Keflavik Airport. So this could be under threat if the next eruption goes further north. So, but if it goes further south, it's also bad, because then it hits Grindavik or the Svartsengi power plant and the Blue Lagoon again, right? So this is absolutely crazy. So Professor Thorvaldur Thorvaldsson, you probably know him because I report about his opinion a lot. He's a volcanologist, and he just made a statement That is basically that he thinks that it is possible that the activity along this Sutnuka crater series, where we've seen all the eruptions and intrusions that happened since last November, could increase to the point where it could lead to an eruption that would last several years, or possibly even forming a real shield volcano. So this is completely the opposite what he just said a few months ago. There he said basically he thinks that by the end of summer everything will be over. He just thought that the last eruption that we had would have been definitely the last one. He kind of predicted that the one before would have been the last one already. And now he completely switches and says, well, this could last for a decade and it could erupt continuously, right? I really value his opinion, and but it's funny, right? The scientists basically, they know that they don't know, and they can only react after one event happened, and then they have to reevaluate everything from the scratch, because this volcano kind of plays cats and mouse with him, right? Or with them, with all the scientists that are looking into this. So this is really crazy. So if that happened, that would mean not only the important highway Reykjanes route would be under threat, but definitely other infrastructure on the Reykjanes Peninsula, because if you have a continuous lava flow, I mean, look at that map. This is just a gray area. This is just the lava carpet that was produced in the last eruption, and that was the biggest one that they ever had there. So the eruptions were getting bigger, and they are getting longer. So if there's even a bigger lava carpet, gosh, it could threaten everything at once, right? They were thinking about moving Keflavik Airport, and Thorvald said, well, don't do that. It doesn't make sense, right? Because the locations that you've picked out, they're even more in the way of a potential lava flow. And he says, well, the parking lot of Keflavik Airport is at risk for lava flow, and even the airport. So this is insane, right? So the Reykjanes Peninsula is their most important area of Iceland, in my opinion, because most of the people that live in Iceland live on the Reykjanes Peninsula. So how would they be able to deal with it? And to move Reykjanes route, they were, have you seen my last video, trying to make a detour or something. There's the water, there's the open ocean. So what do? Build a bridge? Or build something in the ocean? Well, that, I don't know if that's feasible with the weather and the storms and with the earthquakes and everything. And who's going to pay for this, right? So I think if that scenario happens, they're facing a dire future on the Reykjanes Peninsula. I mean, already now that if it's not continuous, the next eruption could already do more damage, right? Damage that defense walls will probably not be able to hold. So they said the defense walls can only hold so much. If there's a continuous lava flow or a bigger lava flow, they're reaching their limits. So Thorvald Thorvaldsen has further explained how he comes up with the shield volcano theory. So he says shield volcanoes in Iceland, they often form in a single long-lasting eruption that can last for several decades, right? It builds up and it builds up and it builds up. But also, he says to form a large shield volcano, an eruption would have to last up to 100 years, right? Oh, that would be something, right? So he says if the next eruption starts again between Sutnukur and Stora Skogfell, the likelihood of a longer lasting eruption could increase. That is what he thinks. And it's very likely that we could see another eruption there, right? Although Thorvald says, well, that it's going to be long lasting, it's not the most likely scenario, but he says the likelihood is growing, right? So I don't think only because he's been wrong in the past with predictions, we should rule that out, because he can only predict that much. He needs to have the latest data and what the last eruption did, and then he has to reverse his predictions, right? But it goes the opposite from everything will be quiet to it could last for decades, right? He has compared the situation kind of with what has been happening in Hawaii, where there was an eruption of Kilauea I've reported about that volcano as well. That eruption began in 1983 and it lasted for 35 years. That's a long time, right? So there was this Puo eruption. So there was a cone that was formed that could be called kind of a shield volcano. But that's all Thorwald was said, right? He doesn't give us a more detailed explanation, but that's all Thorwald was said, right? He doesn't give us a more detailed explanation why exactly he thinks that what happened in Hawaii could happen here on the Reykjanes Peninsula as well. Because, and as always, he makes a statement and there's other scientists that have a different opinion. That often happens with Thorwaldur and the Icelandic Meteorological Office, right? But other scientists are kind of contradict his recent research, and they are suggesting that the eruptions along the Sutnuka crater series are fed by basically a magma chamber, a magma area that's in the Earth's crust. And in this area, magma accumulates in several small pockets. So if that is the case, can you feed a continuous eruption, a long-lasting eruption with these magma areas that are underneath? Well, we know that the current magma chamber that is underneath Shortsengi and the Blue Lagoon, in the longer eruptions, it was basically balancing. So everything that was flowing into the magma chamber was flowing right out. So it was a balanced flow for quite a while during these eruptions, meaning the magma chamber did not empty anymore because enough was coming. And we also see one eruption ends and it starts filling up again right away. So there's still enough deeper down there to feed this. So I guess on that one, we will have to wait and see, guys. But it's definitely a scary scenario, in my opinion. But what I am worried about is, and that's also something scientists have said in the past, is that we could have simultaneous eruptions in different areas. And there are some areas that are a little bit concerning because overall, just recently, the earthquake activity in Iceland is elevated. We have just seen almost 200 tremors across whole Iceland within the last 48 hours, and the strongest one was at Bardarbunga. If you follow my channel, I've reported about Bardarbunga also. This is here on the map, and it's covered with a glacier. It's covered with ice. That's why Bardarbunga is called a subglacial volcano. It's underneath a glacier. That's why if it erupts, it can be especially explosive because of the ice and the water. So there was another magnitude 3.2 at a depth of only 0.1 kilometers. And it was located 6.1 kilometers northeast of Bardarbunga. That's roughly a little bit over 3 miles, I think. And we always said, for a volcanic eruption, the scientists are looking at two things: an increased earthquake activity and also at a land uplift. If you see my videos about Italy, about Campi Flegrei, the land is rising significantly and there were earthquakes, right? That's why it is a little bit scary over there, or more than scary, right? They're just rehearsing a volcanic eruption evacuation, or they will rehearse this early October. So at Bardarbunga, the measuring stations have recorded a land rise. A land rise like we see underneath Shortsengi, guys. A land rise always means something is filling up. Magma is coming to the surface, most likely. So since June, some of these measuring stations have recorded a land rise, and they say that this land rise is occurring much faster than it was rising before. So it started to accelerate, and that is never good, guys, and especially not if it comes with stronger earthquakes. So they say when they were measuring at the edge of the Bardabunga Glacier that the ground has risen by 5 centimeters since then, since June. Also, there is a general land rise in the Vatnajökull area. So also all covered with ice, and there we have these several areas, right? So what is going on there? Will we see something explode there as well? Then that could be simultaneously with something happening in the Sudnuka crater series, because that guy is getting ready again, right? So when in light of this, I mean, Grindavik is not out of the woods, not at all. And we know they have basically invented a new hazard level for Grindavik, like crack collapse. And, you know, now they're trying to fill all these cracks. They have put up 7 kilometers of fencing. I've made a video about this. Check out my Iceland playlist. They're trying, right? They want to open the town. That's the goal, I guess, for tourism and for people. They want to remove these closing posts that only let people inside that have a business to do there or own a home there or whatever. And they want to get rid of this. They really want to open the town back up. And therefore, they're doing crack filling again. And they have fenced off dangerous areas because they've said before, do not let children play. There's cracks in the fields everywhere, but even underneath a paved road, you might not see the crack, but then all of a sudden, because the pavement holds it for a while, then it might crack. And you see here that was happening in the last year in the gymnasium, a artificial turf soccer field. There you didn't see it because there was this turf on top, but then there was a huge crack that opened, right? So they still haven't fixed that, as it seems, right? They don't want people to get back in there. So is this really safe, or is it a good idea to open up Grindavik, to start restoring it in light of what's to come again? Because this eruption could move south also, and then we see larger earthquakes in and around Grindavik again that could destroy everything again. And so does crack filling make sense, or did it make sense how they did it when that poor soul was lost and fell into the crack? Well, we're hearing now from his brother, and his brother that fell in there, he wants him picked up from the crack. So when I saw that headline, I was wondering, well, they don't know where he is. They've been looking for him with drones and diving, and it seems that this deeper lake that they found when they were looking for him is connected with other cracks. It must look like a Swiss cheese down there underneath Grindavik. So probably because the reason why they didn't find him is he probably has been washed away somewhere else. So, and now it's month ago, and there's been more earthquakes and eruptions. So how do they want to find him? I mean, I understand the family, but you know, I think they have to be realistic about this. The family, Ludwig Pettersson was the guy's name that fell into the crack. That was the beginning of the year in January, before, really right before the eruption started. And also, they want a more comprehensive investigation into this accident, and they want officials to make an attempt to recover his remains from the crack, or cracks, because they don't know where he is. And they want another impartial investigation. So it seems they're having problems with the current investigation. They want this carried out from all angles, from all sides. That's what the brother Elias Pettersson says. He made a request to the Minister of Justice that an independent body should be appointed to investigate the accident comprehensively in all aspects from the beginning to the end. But, you know, I'll tell you what has come out of the current investigation. The results have been released, and they're shocking enough. So, quote what the brother said. He says, so that the accident will make people realize that things would have been better done differently, and that this cannot happen again, or at least the chances of it will be greatly reduced. And I think, yes, he's right, because now all these workers are inside of Grindavik trying to fill these cracks again. And do they really know how deep they are? They throw the gravel in and then they compact, but did the gravel really fall to the very bottom? Or is there some bank or balcony, so to speak, with some rocks that catches it for a while and then everything sinks? Because that's what happened basically to Ludwig Pettersson. So today we got the report that the Labor Inspectorate has submitted with their findings, with their investigation. And we'll go deeper into this, but what they're saying, for example, is that there was no adequate risk assessment, and they're referring to the fact that the organization was chaotic and that the project management was disorganized. And we still haven't heard, did they really have a 3D measurement of all the cracks so that they knew how deep they actually are? I don't think so, because if they had known how deep that crack is, they would have been able to calculate the material that is necessary to fill it. So they would have known, oh, the amount that we put in, that can't be it. So then the guy goes on there and compacts it. And then he fell in, right? So the brother says, Elias says, that it's absolutely clear that there was no reason to enter such a dangerous area to fill up the foundation of a house, right? And at the same time, the ground was already moving. The cracks were still getting longer, deeper. New sinkholes were open. It was crazy. I agree with that. And because at that time, it was already clear that people would be bought out from their properties, that the government would buy these properties. He says, quote, and I totally agree with him. Let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments. Do you think he's right? He says, this was not a project that was so dependent on time that it was done how it was done. And I don't think anyone can disagree with that anymore. Yes, I think he is right. So right now, the road administration is in charge of any construction or repair efforts that are happening in Grindavik. That happened after they established basically a committee for Grindavik that would solve all these issues. And the chairman of this committee is saying that they will do everything to learn from this accident and that the safety of the staff will be guaranteed in every respect. And he says, right from the beginning, we sat down and wrote very strict safety rules around this work because we all know the seriousness of it. Yeah, at least have a harness and be tied to something like a bigger excavator that's further away or something. What the brother is saying, that the report that has just been released right now by the Labor and Welfare Administration, that this report underlines his family's demand for a comprehensive investigation to be carried out into this accident. The Labor Inspectorate has said that there was no risk assessment. And also the Labor Inspectorate is wondering whether it was worth the risk. So the brother says, quote, it is the family's wish that they carry out this investigation with the aim of learning from this, to prevent something like this from happening again and to reduce the likelihood of it as much as possible. And Elias says the report that has just been released, he says it's good, but it's mostly limited to the involvement of the EFLA engineering office. That's the company that hired his brother or managed the project and is the contractor in the area. So he says that therefore the report does not deal with the aspect of public defense, the police, or the involvement of the Icelandic natural disaster insurance. So he says, as a result, the family's demand is that the National Disaster Insurance and the Minister of Justice conduct an investigation into all aspects of the case. So the conclusion of the Labor Inspection Authority was that an adequate risk assessment was not carried out when the crack filling in Grindavik was conducted. The contractors have also testified that they had experienced that the organization of this project was chaotic, and there were examples of them moving between jobs according to requests from different parties, including representatives from the town. And Elias, the brother, said that he was not surprised that this was happening because there was a lot of pressure on the project. Who made that pressure? So Elias says those who were responsible for setting regulations on how to work in the area do not seem to have done their job. I think I agree with him, yes. So the final words of that report, they're saying that in light of the situation in Grindavik, where the sequence of events related to natural disasters was still ongoing, yes, earthquakes, eruptions, right? One can wonder if it was worth the risks. Yeah. And Elias comments on that, and he says, quote, "They are very remarkable in my opinion, and the fact that an organization should put this forward strongly suggests that they themselves have doubts that this project was so necessary that they had to take such a huge risk because of it." In that opinion, the family and I agree that it is obvious that there was an unnecessary risk, right? So lack of risk assessment plus chaotic organization, only 2 workers, they leave one alone there. That's a red flag. Why not wearing a harness if you know these cracks are dangerous, right? Some workers have also testified that the project management was unclear, and that it happened that people were doing 2 or 3 other projects under a completely different project management, right? And so nobody knew what the other one was doing, and there was no umbrella for someone that basically had control over this. And it's surprising for such a small town like Grindavik, really. So the workers had been working to fill that crack for over 2 days when the accident happened, right? It was these 2 men that worked together there on the project. And then it was Ludvig Pettersson who then fell in there, and his colleague who were working on that specific crack. And they almost had finished with that crack. And Ludwig was working on the final finishing touches, which was the surface compaction of that soil there. And among other things, the other guy, his colleague, was responsible for picking up material from a truck that was used to fill the cracks. So one load had just been unloaded, and they thought that this was enough. But then it was decided to get more just to be safe. So his colleague left around 9:30 a.m. to the truck and then returned around 30 minutes later. But by that time, his friend Ludwig was nowhere to be seen. So the co-worker tried to call his colleague, but the phone turned out to be in an excavator that was standing nearby. So Ludwig didn't have his phone on him. That's another, gosh, maybe they could have located him with the phone, right? So then the co-workers saw a hole that was by the house in the garden where they had done that work, filling that crack. And that was the moment when the co-worker realized that Ludwig had probably fallen into that hole there. But he still at that time had a hard time to believe that this had really happened. And there were theories, oh, maybe that guy committed suicide, or he vanished, he disappeared, he took the chance, right? So he called the other employees of his engineering office, and then also the emergency line. And then around the same time, another employee of the engineering office arrived. And luckily, this guy was a geoengineer and also an experienced rescue worker. So he provided the appropriate equipment, and he was allowed to descend into that crack to investigate the situation. And at that time, they really thought that they're doing a rescue. But Ludwig was nowhere to be seen, which was really, really strange. So the soil compactor that they were using to fill in the crack. There was a lot of cavity, a lot of crack underneath that soil compactor, and it fell into that crack a little bit as well. So what the report says about this, that Ludwig worked with a loose soil compactor standing on the embankment of that crack, as it was not possible to work with the equipment that was fixed on the excavator. Unfortunately not. So the so-called, this vibrating sled of that soil compactor probably caused the material to fall down into that crack, right? You know, these are these fate coincidences. They couldn't work with the equipment that was fixed on the excavator. That's the so-called vibrating sled, because it had broken down the day before. So maybe he would not have fallen in there. So, and here comes the bad stuff. The engineering office was aware of the failure, but says it did not know that a loose soil compactor could even be used for the work, because they said they gave the instructions that all the work should be done with that kind of machine that's attached to the excavator, right? So it is believed that the ground suddenly opened up when Ludwig was working, right? And then he probably fell down together with that mobile soil compactor. That's what the report says. The report also states that the available fall protection equipment was not used. So it was even available. So something is seriously wrong here. And why wasn't it used? The engineering company, EFLA, that was responsible for that, they had doubts that traditional fall protection equipment, for example, one line, would serve its purpose in these conditions. Oh, so then you use nothing? Or maybe you wait until you have something that would serve its purpose in these conditions. I understand the family. I really, really do. This is upsetting. And that's proof that there was no adequate risk assessment, right? About the geological conditions in the area, and they didn't question or try to evaluate how work in this area could be conducted, taking into account the conditions so that the safety of the staff would not be at risk. So in the opinion of this labor inspectorate, in light of its involvement in the work, the engineering firm should have participated in the preparation of such a risk assessment. Yes. And they also say, similarly, the contractor in question should have undergone that risk assessment as well, or even should have conducted their own risk assessment. And it seems nobody had done that. And then the labor inspectorate furthermore says they cannot state how exactly the introduction of hazards and procedures was done to those involved in the work, to Ludwig, right? But also how the follow-up was done. So nothing. So this is really, really sad. Ludwig Petersen was born in August 22nd, 1973. He has 4 children and 2 stepchildren and 2 grandchildren. So this is a disaster that should not have happened. And I really, really hope they learn from it. And I really, really hope the family will find their answers, and somehow, somewhere down the road, their peace. It would be, I think, great for them if they were able to find Ludwig. I have my doubts about that, but who knows? Maybe it is possible, guys. I'll close this video with that. It's kind of sad. So far, Ludwig has been the only victim of this volcanic and seismic activity that's happening there, and let's hope and pray that he remains the only one, and that, you know, some places are a little bit more careful in the future. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope to see you soon. Check out these important new informations here in the end screen. Bye-bye.